Stand by for action.
Drop your guns, everyone. And remember, I mean business.
What's your name, boy?
Joe 90.
An unusual name. What are you doing here?
I'm an agent for the World Intelligence Network.
Satisfactory. Most satisfactory.
Look, there are 600 people up there with about 40 minutes to live. Now, you can't help them, but I believe we can. Now, what's it gonna be?
It would seem that this Captain Scarlet is now indestructible. This presents us with the clear and exciting expectation that he will become our greatest asset in the fight against the Mysterons.
If anything else goes wrong, I want you to be ready to act immediately.
Well, that was no ordinary breakdown. We've got to get up there and help them, but fast.
Thunderbirds are go.
Anything can happen in the next half hour.
This is Puppets Go Boom. We know you can hear us, Earthmen. I am Arun.
And I am Patricia.
To continue our fight against the human species, we will erase all cat videos off the internet. So for those of you who are wondering about that really weird intro, we are indeed doing, finally, Captain Scarlet and the Mysterons.
Yes.
Which kind of sounds like a band name when you really think about it, rather than like, you know, a sci-fi Super Mario Nation show. So, my original introduction to this was that, okay, so we've seen Thunderbirds, we've seen Stingray, which obviously came on the back of, the popularity of Thunderbirds coming back because, another Super Mario Nation show. And then finally they started showing Captain Scarlet and the Mysterons in the reruns of that show, and this was such a different show because up from Four Feathered Falls to Fireball XL5 to Supercar and then so forth and so forth, we'd sort of had this really action adventure, but then some silliness and some fun all mixed up into this. Captain Scarlet takes a very different tone. This is about a secret not a secret organization, but an organization known as Spectrum, which are in an ongoing war of nerves with these Martians known as the Mysterons. The whole thing starts off with when Captain Black goes on his expedition around Mars to see if there's any life on this planet, and they come across the Mysterons, and because of a very, very awful call, thinking that they were about to be attacked, Captain Black orders for the Mysteron base to be utterly destroyed. But then they see them be recreated again, and then Captain Black effectively gets hypnotized and is then turned into a Mysteron, effectively, and then goes off to do their bidding to do all sorts of horrible things, whether it's trying to eliminate the world president, whether it's to take out certain world leaders, whether it's to destroy certain places or certain cities or things like that. It's a constant game of sometimes the humans will sometimes win, Spectrum sometimes win, and then other times, there's episodes where the Mysterons will actually succeed. And it's as much as heroic as Captain Scarlet is, he doesn't always succeed in his mission from time to time.
And so let's talk about Captain Scarlet for a second. So Captain Scarlet is one of the main soldiers behind Spectrum, and in the very first episode, he is in a car accident, and he's actually controlled by the Mysterons. And then eventually, he is broken away from their hypnotic spell, and so eventually he becomes part of Spectrum again, but this time he is indestructible. Every time that you kill him off in any way, shape, or form, he will come back completely unscathed.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting, really. The one thing I think we don't understand about Captain Scarlet, I mean, I guess this is all part of the mystery, I guess you could say, about the way that the Mysterons, conduct themselves, is that why is it that all the other Mysterons seem to die, but then Captain Scarlet himself is somehow indestructible and can just recreate himself again? It's like that was never really explained in the show, and I'm not saying this to be overcritical off the bat, but the one thing I say about this show is that this goes away from the comical campiness of it all, and it really takes you into this really eerie and really mysterious sort of show. The show is a lot darker, and I mean literally darker. The intro shows when Captain Black comes into the scene, it shows you in a graveyard at night, and then there's times where they are like in the dark, and they are being there's people like being confronted by Captain Black and being killed. At the same time, and there's just this eeriness and loneliness to some of the scenes in this show. For example, like there's a truck driver who delivers some weapons, for Spectrum, and then Captain Black shows out of nowhere, and then just has this really interesting conversation with him, but then all of a sudden kills him. And then they end up taking over, the Angels. By the way, we'll talk about the Angels later on in the show, but it's. The way that this show really grips you is it's not the way that Thunderbirds did. And I really like that because I was a bit worried that, hey, we're going to have Captain Scarlet and we're just going to have, a lot of, comedic, antics in this. But no, it was totally different. It was about, the action and the adventure and the mystery and the thrills were all turned all the way up. And what you get in return is what I think Jerry Anderson, really wanted to do in his heart. And I think that's the reason why I have more appreciation maybe for Captain Scarlet than maybe some of the other Super Mario Nation shows. But I mean, Thunderbirds will always be the big show out of it. But I think Captain Scarlet, I think, deserves a lot of credit, and I think has a lot more going for it. I think in regards to an adult-orientated drama.
Yeah, I would say in terms of story, this is the best one out of the Super Mario Nation shows that we've seen so far. I think that the reason why is because they were able to take a lot of the mystery and a lot of the suspense that we've seen in previous Mario Nation shows, like Fireball XL5 and Stingray and Thunderbirds, and they were able to, what I think perfected it. It was able to become a lot more action-packed. It was able to have a lot more stakes, and it felt like there was a storyline that was going on, where the other ones felt like they were self-contained, and things that they brought back, they never really mention it, or they mention it, but it's way further down the line, which you can definitely tell was a production issue. But this one, I never really felt that. This one, I felt that it was slowly getting closer into piecing up the puzzle of who the Mysterons were and their motivations and Spectrum's plans of trying to make peace with them at first, or trying to learn more information about them, or trying to find a way that they can be able to break out of their the Mysterons' revenge scheme and all that kind of stuff. And so yeah, I felt that it was really, really fascinating, and it really made me want to tune into every single episode so that hopefully we can learn something new that we didn't learn previously.
Yeah, and I think the one thing that also brings the strength to the product is the cast of characters that we have. We have Captain Scarlet, but and they also Captain Blue, and they also have this interesting relationship because they aren't just Captain Scarlet and Captain Blue, they're Adam and I keep forgetting the name of Captain Blue. We're gonna have to look him up, but I mean they're on first name basis.
Adam is Captain Blue, and Paul is Captain Scarlet.
Yeah, and so they have this really great relationship. Where they are really personal friends, and they're on where it's not just Captain Scarlet and Captain Blue. They're on first name basis. Where when times really starts getting tough.
Yeah.
For the one where they're trying to guess the passcode for setting off the missile, and they are at amen, but actually in fact it's 0. But the situation that's so stressed is that they're no longer we did it, Adam, we did it. It's I really like the relationship between basically Captain Scarlet, who is our protagonist, but also dare I say I think Captain Blue also is somewhat he is a supporting character, but I think he's the second main character I think you could say of the show.
Yeah, and I definitely feel a much more stronger relationship than say maybe Troy and Phones, or Steve and Dr. Venus, or Mike with either Dr. Beaker or Professor Popkiss. I definitely do feel their camaraderie. They do a lot of missions together. They're on a first name basis. They are concerned with one another when things just seem to go really wrong, like in the one episode in which when Captain Scarlet is dismissed because of his gambling problems, and Captain Blue was like concerned. It's like, something's not right. Like, why would they let him go because of, the fact that Captain Scarlet lost a lot of money due to gambling? Like, there has to be more to it.
And also
than
on top of that, like, Adam knows Paul so well that he knows he doesn't gamble. So why on earth did he do it?
Yeah.
Like, there's just the great thing I think about this is that they really do point out because the one thing that I think they had a problem with, I think in other Super Mario Nation shows, is that they could tell that the inconsistencies amongst the character traits was going on. And I think the one thing I think Captain Scarlet does is that I think it proves a point that Century 21's films was not about I think they wanted to prove a point where they say, look, we can get consistency in our characters, and I think that episode proved the point where it's like, oh hey, these characters don't do these types of things, and we're going to point them out. And I think that's the strength of that episode. I think that was their their redemption. I think in that you got to like all the times when it's like, why has this character done this? Why has this character done that? That's not how it should go.
Yeah.
Like it's just that's at least not what we're accustomed with this particular character. But then I think the one thing Captain Scarlet gets correct compared to the other Super Mario Nation shows is that they have consistency in their characters.
And not only that, but for the first time in a while, in terms of, I know that there was a little bit of toe dipping when it came to this, and it was sometimes played off really wrong, is the diversity of the cast.
Yeah.
Where Captain Scarlet is British, Captain Blue's American, you have Lieutenant Green, who is Trinidadian, and the Angels are a mixture of different types of cultures. You have French, you have Japanese, you have American. So, yeah, it kind of plays it once again in the most stereotypical way. But at the same time, when this show first came out, this was
I think this is a better approach, I think, compared to all our other, ventures into, across the world. And I think there is one thing about that, is that in our previous episode, we talked about how much of a, phenomenon that Thunderbirds actually was, where it was broadcast around the world. And so I think with more eyeballs across the planet, I think they realize, we need to be a bit better with the way that we represent certain places around the world. And Spectrum is a world organization. There's a world president now. And so I think the idea is that this whole international organization should actually be international.
Yeah.
And so I think that's the reason behind why the representation, I think, in Captain Scarlet, I think, is a lot better than other shows that we've had in the past. Yeah. Because I think there was a lot of insular thinking, I think, with all the other shows that came about. I think it's only now that they realized that they had a worldwide audience now that things had to get better.
Yeah, absolutely. And, another thing that they were able to get better was the consistency of the tone. Whereas previous Super Mario Nation shows, it was trying to treat itself seriously, but it just went way goofy, intentionally or unintentionally, depending on what the show was. And sometimes it can take you out of it. But this one is consistently that this is a much more serious show. They're not going to pull out jokes. They're not going to be goofy and over the top with a lot of silly characters or anything like that. No, they're actually telling a much more cohesive story involving with a lot of twists and turns, involving with a lot of mystery, involving with a lot of dramatic things. They are really trying to treat the audience seriously with the tone that they're doing with this, and I really do commend them for this.
Well, I think in regards to the kind of the humor, it's more, dare I say, more situational. I think in the way that they do this. So, for example, in one of the end of the episodes, there's a hot-headed general who wants to blow Mars out of the universe, with all the missiles, and then Colonel White trying to get to the bottom of the situation as quickly as possible, so he can prevent effectively making the war of nerves a far more serious situation. And so when they finally get to the end of that, they get a call back from this general, and he basically brags about the fact that it wasn't Spectrum who saved the day. It was the fact that he threatened the Mysterons and they backed away. And then Colonel White's kind of like, oh, that hot-headed general, he shouldn't he should be giving us all that. And then Captain Scarlet kind of says Colonel, I think you remember that. So we don't take compliments from other organizations. We're not here for that type of thing. And those type of conversations are actually pretty good. And that's where the humor comes from in this show, is that it's the clash of personalities. amongst different people in this, and it creates this. That's where the humor creates itself. They're not jokes that are like written for slapstick or just written for comedic, for comedy. Like this is something that sounds kind of plausible that would kind of happen in the show.
Yeah.
So and also like the little joke that Captain Scarlet says at the end when they're at the casino and Captain Blue says, "So you going to fancy a gamble yourself?" And says, "You know me, Paul. I don't gamble." And like it's he doesn't do it. So those types of ha-has that are in Captain Scarlet is that's where the humor is in this show, but it's not outlandish like you would have like in the other Super Mario Nation shows before it.
Yeah. And another thing that I really do appreciate about this show is the fact that each episode has at least a little breadcrumb of some answers that you've been wanting to know about, either about the Mysterons or about Spectrum or about Captain Scarlet or about Captain Black. I mean, it just like feeds you into like, a lot of the mystery that you've been building up into your head every single time that you watch an episode. And it also gets you into a lot of suspense. And it's like, are we going to learn about the Mysterons? Is Captain Black going to be captured? Is Captain Scarlet going to be in a bad situation that he can't get himself out of? What's the story behind Spectrum? What about the other characters? What are their backstories like? I
probably imagine like a lot of the gaps that were left, I think, in the show were filled in by comic books and stories and audio dramas and things like that. I probably imagine there's a lot of that out there, but right now we are literally just concentrating on the show. We're not concentrating like on any of the outer things.
Yeah, and the sad part about this is that this unlike all the other Super Mario Nation shows, this is the one that only lasted about 32 episodes, while the rest of them were 39.
Yeah, and which is a shame, really, because Captain Scarlet, was I really love to have heard if there was, a conclusion to the war of nerves between, the Earth and Mars. It kind of like leaves it off. Unfortunately, with this show, like some of the other shows that we're going to be dealing with now here on end, is that it ends with a clip show, which is really disappointing.
Out of all the clip show episodes that we have gotten throughout this entire retrospective, this is the one that made me the most angry. I was so furious when I saw it.
Really? Why this one in particular?
Because the previous episode that it had, where, again, this was another trope that we've been seeing, the Doomsday dream sequence, where it looked like that the Mysterons were going to defeat Spectrum, where they were destroying everything. Like, it looked like the Mysterons were winning. It looked like that the Mysterons were going to defeat Spectrum once and for all, and everybody was going to die. And I was like, oh, wow. This is so amazing. This is how the show is going to essentially, lead over to maybe the series finale where, when, all of Spectrum is destroyed and they have to pick themselves up and they need to be able to fight them off once and for all. They try to make peace with the Mysterons, but they refuse. And they're learning more and more about the Mysterons every single episode. Is this the time where we're going to have that final showdown? No, we don't. It's a clip show episode where Captain Blue is captured by a person who was a Mysteron who is questioning Captain Blue into thinking that he is a Mysteron. And then he starts reflecting on, this is what Captain Scarlet has been doing, and this is the Mysterons and all that kind of stuff. And it's stuff that we've seen before. And then in the last 5 minutes, we realized, this is a Mysteron all along. And Captain Blue was being really suspicious on who he was. Captain Scarlet rescues him. And then the episode just ends right there. And I'm like, son of a bitch, man. Like, oh my God, this is how this show ends? It resolves absolutely nothing.
No. And I would imagine they did this on purpose because they want the shows kind of like be ongoing, like, with reruns. It's kind of like what Nickelodeon did with, like, their shows back in the 90s. There wasn't like any final episode. It's like, let's just like have it all kind of keep going for like reruns and things like that. I think that was probably the mentality behind it.
And in a show focusing on story, this is a major thing that I absolutely hate when shows decide to leave things on a cliffhanger, and it just makes you wonder about like, what happens next? next? We will never know. And again, I'm sure that they revealed this in the comics, and they did do a reboot of this back in 2005, but we have not seen the reboot, so we cannot tell you about how they were able
somewhere
to...
down the line, if we get a chance to do like, the new 3D, shows, like, the new Thunderbirds and the new Captain Scarlet, we will definitely let you know about them.
Yeah,
but right now we're concentrating on the classic Super Mario Nation shows.
Right. So, again, I know absolutely nothing about the continuations of Captain Scarlet in the comics or in the audio plays. So, I'm sure that they probably answered those questions, but if they haven't, oh man, I'm just so pissed off that they never really did a proper ending to this, because it was leading to something so great. It was up there with Thunderbirds as like the best thing that they've ever done, and they blew it badly. I'm sorry.
I just want to let everybody know that we had a Nando's before we started this podcast, and I thought that was the spiciest thing I was going to have this evening. It's spicy Patricia.
I'm sorry, but that's just what happens when, you're really invested into something, and then when it just completely topples over, it's like...
But isn't that what's so great about it, is that we're so invested in this show? I think, dare I say, maybe we'll do, what's the top, Super Mario Nation shows, probably later on in the podcast. But right now, isn't Captain Scarlet kind of our personal favorites at the minute?
It is mine.
Yeah, I would say it is.
Yeah, I know that Thunderbirds...
Don't get me wrong, Thunderbirds is a great show too. But,
we already pointed out the flaws that Thunderbirds had. Especially for somebody like me who's literally watched it for the first time. I had no nostalgia for it, and I had just came into it with a fresh perspective. And yes, I do understand now that I've seen all the previous Super Mario Nation shows, and then I saw Thunderbirds, on why it was a massive hit. It had a lot of action and adventure. It had a lot of mystery. The vehicles were really cool, but there were problems with it that I pointed out, and you pointed out in the podcast, where, because it was an hour long, the pace was super slow, and some of the characters weren't utilized very well, and also there were some uncomfortable stereotypes, and the kid episodes suck.
Oh yeah, the kid episode. That's what I was worried about the show. They were going to do a kid episode.
Yeah.
I thought, because all these Super Mario Nation shows have kid episodes, but no, they knew exactly not to do that.
Yeah, and there was no goofy side characters like what we saw with Supercar or Fireball XL5. None of those. And
we got rid of the goofy side characters, I think, when we got to Thunderbirds at this point, because there wasn't really any goofy side characters going on.
No, there wasn't. There were definitely some things that Thunderbirds perfected when it came to the previous Super Mario Nation shows, but it still had some flaws that needed tightening up. And I felt that Captain Scarlet at that point was the peak of it. And yeah, once again, you have the classic Lou Grade, who, after, wanting to, do a bigger, better show after Thunderbirds, and then after Captain Scarlet reached its point, instead of a second season, nope, let's move on to the next show.
Yeah, and so let's go through some of the episodes. So I think the Mysterons episode, that's episode 1, the one that kicks it all off. That, I think, is the episode that stands out in a lot of people's minds, because it is, that's the episode that sets it all off. And also, Captain Scarlet is not the good guy in this episode. He's actually the villain, because he's the one who kidnaps the world president, and he's the one who tries to take him away, which is kind of interesting, really, because the idea was to assassinate the world president, but they couldn't take hold of Captain Scarlet. The first thing they couldn't do was kind of crash the plane that Captain Scarlet was piloting. What was the whole deal of capturing him and then sending him off on this chase scene and everything like that, and then taking him over into the car view and stuff.
Yeah.
What, he couldn't just shoot him there and then, or crash the plane or something like that, and that would be the mission, because that's kind of what they did with some of the other stuff, with when they're taking over planes and other things as well. They just kind of crash them or destroy them in some way, and then you kind of just recreate them in their own image.
Yeah, and that's one of the interesting things about the Mysterons, is that they don't only control people, they can control objects. So there will be some episodes in which they don't kill off a person. They would actually take control of a plane or a tank or a car, and that would be really interesting, because it's they don't know who they're chasing or what they're chasing.
So all the people right now are scared of Final Destination. It's got nothing on Captain Scarlet and the Mysterons.
Yeah, it's true because they're able to replicate a person perfectly, down to their voice, down to the way they look, down to their memories. And it's only when that it comes to the point in which they need to kill them off or steal something or being able to, get them to get Captain Scarlet and Captain Blue closer to the trap that they're setting up. That's when they reveal, oh, you are going down, Earthman. It's like, that's when you realize, oh, that's a person who's controlled by a Mysteron. And I think that, that's actually really, really scary because it's very similar to like Invasion of the Body Snatchers. It's like, they look like a regular person and in reality, they're an alien. So that just goes to show you about that you can't trust anybody in this world.
Yeah. The one thing the episode I found quite interesting also as well was Lunaville 7, where the moon wanted to declare independence and didn't want anything to do with the war on with the Mysterons, and then you find out that they've actually been colluding with the Mysterons this entire time. I thought that was quite an interesting episode.
That was a really interesting episode.
Yeah, and I just thought that also it was a great commentary on what we're kind of like dealing with today in 2025, which is artificial intelligence, and the fact that this computer was running everything on the moon, and then it only just took Captain Scarlet to swap the chips around between him and the leader of the moon people to effectively say oh, I've got control now and I can launch a ship, and then the guy just goes crazy and just starts shooting up the computer, and then it blows up effectively the moon base. Yeah, I found that episode I think was. But the one thing I would dislike about this episode is that the moon mobile that hops up and down and stuff.
That was so slow.
So let me get this straight. You can have a terrain vehicle going around the surface of Mars, but you couldn't have the same thing going for the moon.
Yeah, I mean,
I guess maybe the justification with it is because of all the craters, I guess.
I guess it could be the craters. Maybe it could be gravity. I don't know. But man, it was just an agonizing watch.
Yeah, it was just up and down.
Up and down.
Up and down. It was constantly going and going. It was just like, let's get to the next part of the plot, please.
Yeah, exactly.
It's not interesting to look at.
No, it's not. It's just, you're just looking at a vehicle just going up and down, and then just them sitting there waiting for them to get there.
The one thing I will say that is a bit disappointing with Captain Scarlet is a little bit is that I don't think there's much imagination in the vehicles, I think, as there was in Thunderbirds. I mean, don't get me wrong, International Rescue had 5 machines, and but then there was also the stuff that was in the Thunderbird 2 pods as well. But I mean, when you come to Captain Scarlet, effectively you've got the Spectrum cars, the Spectrum Pursuit vehicle, you've got Spectrum Cloud Base itself, then you've got the Angels, and then I mean also besides the jetpacks and things there's not really much else to write home about in regards to all the technology that they use.
Yeah, it seems like they ran out of their creative ideas after they created Thunderbirds. We have all of these vehicles that we're going to have one person control each, and it's going to be really different. And then when you get to Captain Scarlet, it's like,
there's a car, and there's a plane.
And there's a truck, and
there's Cloud Base.
Yeah, and...
I mean, Cloud Base is quite cool, where it can, it can fly around and move into, different, parts of continents if it wanted to.
Yeah, but it's not really... Yeah, but it's not really that unique, because we already kind of saw that with Stingray, in which, you have a command base that it can be able to go up and down into the surface and up into the and go underground. It's I mean, it's the same thing except it's up in the clouds.
The one thing I was a bit disappointed at is that so when they did the night sequences, where it's kind of what you couldn't, all they did was just dim the lights. It's just it's still the daytime background, but they've just turned the lights down a little bit. And it's come on, guys, you couldn't just just do it will be pitch black in the air, and maybe you could do a couple of darkened clouds, but you couldn't tell me you couldn't just do the bare minimal to make a night sky.
Yeah. That was kind of a little awkward.
I thought all they did was just kind of dim, unless they kind of took the existing day footage and just just reduce the contrast on it. I mean, and then it's night. There you go.
Yeah.
It's yeah.
That's classic horror movie levels in which we're going to transition from black and white to color. How can we tell if it's nighttime? Oh, let's just turn it blue. There you go. It's nighttime. It's blue. It's dark blue. It's nighttime. There you go.
Yeah. The one thing we have to criticize, unfortunately, though, is that the puppets in this show are far more stiff than, dare I say, I think, whatever you may think of the goofiness of Supercar, Fireball XL5, Stingray, Thunderbirds, and the like. I mean, at least when they were like moving around and like they were dancing and things like that, it was like kind of like hilarious. And but then also when they were moving around, they actually kind of felt like, oh wow, these the characters are actually kind of moving around on the screen. You know, at least the ones they weren't kind of like just kind of bouncing around, just to give the illusion of like walking. In Captain Scarlet, I mean, like all you really do is kind of see the top of them. And
yeah, I mean that's what they wanted to do from the very beginning, because as we've seen in a lot of the documentaries of on YouTube, courtesy of Century 21 Films, is that Jerry Anderson really hated when he had to shoot puppets from down below, because he thought that the walking sequences of the puppets were awful. And so their solution...
What gave it its charm, really.
In a show like Captain Scarlet, he felt that it was unacceptable. So that's why you don't see the puppets from the waist down. That's why you're always seeing them in vehicles. That's why you're always seeing them...
Well, if you've ever seen them walking, you basically just see people's feet. Like they literally get live actors kind of like have them walking around.
They utilize the live actors a lot more in this, as opposed to like the previous Super Mario Nation shows.
And I get what he was going for, because I think Jerry Anderson wanted to kind of show like every TV, because he was like, look, I can make a live action version of this.
I mean, he was really pushing at this point in his career that he wanted to do more live action stuff, because he was getting sick and tired of doing the puppet stuff.
You had something that nobody else was doing before, and it was very unique. And in fact, it's so unique, we're actually doing a podcast series about it right now. So I just wish where Jerry had the fourth visions to say, oh wow, we're creating something here that people will be talking about for decades, maybe even a century. For funny enough, here we are, 21st century films being talked about in the 21st century. Here you go. We're not just saying this just for ourselves as well, is that the people who did the puppeteering for Captain Scarlet and Mysterons did not like the puppets either.
No, they didn't.
They thought what was inside them was far too small for them to like properly operate. They preferred the base model for Thunderbirds, Captain Stingray, and even Fireball XL5.
Yeah, because they were bigger and they were able to maneuver them a lot easier.
Exactly, yeah. But then you could, and I get that Captain Scarlet was more adult orientated than Thunderbird, Stingray, and Fireball XL5 were. But even if kids were watching the show, you could easily have them put themselves in the situation of oh hey, because the way that the puppets looked, they actually looked like that kids could also be these characters as well. So that also increased the imagination of the viewer to say that, oh hey, I could probably be this heroic thing. And actually that was a big thing as well, because in the revival, and I think even in the first run, the Thunderbirds costumes I think also were quite good as well. In regards to sales, I think a lot of kids have bought them. My understanding, and also a lot of people in Halloween also went as Thunderbirds.
Really?
From International Rescue from time to time. So there was that, and also a lot of people also like dress up as Captain Scarlet as well. But I think and I get once again this isn't the point, because Captain Scarlet is gravitated probably towards more you and me than it was any kids that were in the room. I mean, obviously there was that because of all the the adult stuff that was going on in the show.
Yeah.
But I think that's where Captain Scarlet, I think, kind of sort of went off kilter compared to its other Super Mario Nation predecessors, and that it became a little less relatable. I think because the way that the puppets were, and the people who didn't work with them didn't like them, and some of the people who had to look at them didn't really like them all that much either. I think that's where it's problems started to kind of come awry as well. And also when the toys came out, everyone kind of compared them to Action Man. When they first came out, or I guess you could say G.I. Joe, I guess, for America, I guess you could say.
Sure.
And so that became problematic in itself, because it's kind of oh, Captain Scarlet's just another, action kind of puppet, figure, if you will. But that's, that was a problem. I think, at least the way I translate it in my mind.
My critique of Captain Scarlet is that some of the characters are really inconsistent. I'm sorry, and I don't know if this is an unpopular opinion, but I mean, I really did appreciate that they were able to add a lot more women into this show, because in the previous episodes of Super Mario Nation, a lot of the women characters leave a lot to be desired. They were...
they're products of their time, as we said previously.
Exactly, yeah. And so I really did appreciate that they were able to add more females into the show, like the Angels.
The Angels are their own team, effectively, of women.
Yeah, exactly. And so I appreciate that, but the problem is that they don't utilize them very well. Other than, what was her name? Destiny or Melody? Yeah, Melody.
Yeah.
Other than Melody, none of the other angels get any development whatsoever. They're barely even focused on their own specific episodes.
I think maybe if they had more episodes, like you said, there was only 32 episodes of Captain Scarlet. Maybe if they had the 39, maybe there might be other adventures that they probably would have been involved in.
Yeah, because we did get like maybe an episode or two focusing on Melody, where she got her focus, and I know that Destiny got her fair share of episodes.
Well, Symphony, if you remember, was the one who was captured by Captain Black, and she was ended up being radiated and then sent back into the SUV.
Yeah, and that was the episode that we learned that Symphony is Captain Blue's girlfriend.
Yeah, exactly. So Captain Blue's got some that's some of the great things about this, because they're in funny enough, it's been forbidden in International Rescue to have relationships with other people, and also it's been forbidden in Stingray, I guess, in a way, and also I guess in Fireball XL5 it's confusing. We still don't understand the relationship between Steve Zodiac and Dr. Venus to this day. But in regards to Spectrum, I mean, I guess they're pretty easy going with this sort of thing, I guess.
I guess so.
Yeah.
Yeah, and also the other characters that are featured in the show, they are just like quick cameos at best, like Captain Outre, Captain Magenta, Captain Gray.
I always found Captain Magenta quite hilarious as a name. Really, it's like your name is Captain Magenta.
Yeah,
it's like it's like was Captain Pink too much? Did you ask for that name to be changed? I guess it's like, why do I have to be Captain Pink?
Yeah, I mean, and then there's also like Lieutenant Green, who's fitting into the same. Here's the assistant to the commander.
I love Lieutenant Green. He can be quite fun to be around. I think when the time comes about it, there's just this time where it's like where when he gets in the field, like, good grief, he takes no prisoners. Literally, someone says, asking for his identification, he just punches him in the face. We just found that hilarious.
Yeah, I wish there were more episodes with Lieutenant Green.
They probably would have been if it hadn't got to 32 episodes.
I know, but yeah, I mean, he feels like he wasn't utilized to his full potential. I mean, he was mostly like stuck in the office alongside with Colonel White, and then in the one or two episodes,
he was sort of kind of like, he was just Lieutenant Nighty from time to time as well. He just basically answered to Colonel White the majority of the time, and so there wasn't, and also he didn't really get too much Yeah, it's funny because it would have been interesting to see some pushback between, because the Colonel White and Lieutenant Green relationship is also quite interesting as well, because Colonel White demands so much from the Spectrum organization, rightly so, because he's in a war of nerves with the Mysterons, and I probably imagine he's getting a lot of pressure from that. And then you got Lieutenant Green, who is trying to be as reasonable and trying to be as productive as possibly can, but then obviously he obviously is only human and can only do so much obviously to do that. And so there's an interesting dynamic, I think, between Colonel White and Lieutenant Green, and Lieutenant Green with some of the other captains as well. So it is a shame that we didn't get to see anything kind of like outside of that more, really, but I think maybe it would be interesting to see what the Lieutenant Green episode, specific episode would have been like if they decided to focus on him.
Yeah, like I felt, again, I think that a lot of these characters leave a lot to be desired because there wasn't enough episodes to focus on them, and I think that was a wasted opportunity.
Well, I mean, let's be honest. I mean, it's Captain Scarlet and the Mysterons, so when you watch Captain Scarlet and the Mysterons, you're expecting Captain Scarlet and you're expecting the Mysterons. I think that it does exactly what it says on the tin.
I guess that's true, yeah. But, I've been one of those people that just because a show has the title character as the title of the show, it doesn't mean that you can't focus on everybody else. Like, one of our favorite shows of all time is Hey Arnold. And it doesn't just focus on Arnold. It focuses on his grandparents. It focuses on Helga, Gerald, Harold. It focuses on Phoebe and Mr. Simmons. It focuses on a whole bunch of other characters.
Well, keep in mind, Hey Arnold had 5 seasons and 2 movies to kind of broaden itself out. Captain Scarlet effectively didn't get that. It'd be interesting to see what happened if Captain Scarlet did have 5 seasons of shows.
I'm sure, I'm sure that they would have, utilized the full potential of that. But, Lou Grade being Lou Grade is like,
exactly.
Let's move on to the next thing. We're done here. Yep, let's just move on. Overall, I do see why this show was a huge hit when it first came out. It definitely was able to push the limits of any Super Mario Nation show that we've seen up to this point. And it's gotten all the praise that it deserves. I mean, it has a great story. The villains are really, really threatening. And I think that the characters are really great for, the times that we do get to spend with them. And it has a great balance of humor and action, mystery, and...
Also, this is the third show where we get to go back to Scotland again. But thankfully, no Loch Ness Monster this time.
Yeah. Yeah, no derpy Loch Ness Monster, that's for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, but again, it does play to a lot of the tropes that we've seen in previous Super Mario Nation shows. Oh, we have to have the dream sequence. Here comes a clip show episode. But it just does it in the most frustrating way. It's like, oh, this shouldn't have been there because the story was just going so well. I mean, we wanted to know. I mean, we were so close of seeing a proper battle between the Mysterons and Spectrum, but we technically never got it. We could have.
It would have been fun to see a battle between Captain Scarlet and Captain Black themselves.
Yeah, we never got that.
Yeah, I mean, we came close to having it.
We were so close of having it. There were times in which that Captain Black was.
I mean, let's be honest. I mean, like, given the limitations of the characters, could you really want to see like a fight sequence between Captain Black and Captain Scarlet in the way that it was? Like, it probably wouldn't have been quite limiting to watch. If anything, they would have made it like just a gun battle, and then Captain Black would just run away. I think that's what it probably would have been.
I know, but I mean, still, at least we could have seen it. But no, we never got that. It reached such a high note that it just continued to get lower and lower and lower from there, and then it just never fully recovered.
Yeah, and but here's the thing about this. Like, we, despite the fact that it has quite a few flaws, I mean, like, it is still our favorite, series.
Yes.
And one thing I think that Captain Scarlet has, I think that some of the other shows, I think also has, is that, it asks us for more. We're asking for more. Like, it's so good.
Yeah.
The way that it is. And dare I say, like, when we get to probably ranking these shows somewhere down the line, I mean, like, it's going to be a massive coin toss about, what would I put over, like, whether it be Thunderbirds or whether it be Captain Scarlet or whether it be one or two of the other ones.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a massive favorite. I'll definitely tell you that.
It's my personal favorite so far. And again, this is from somebody who is just getting into watching these Super Mario Nation shows for the very first time. I was able to really get invested in the story, the characters. It had a lot of high stakes. I was really, really invested in it. And I noticed that a lot of the things that they were able to perfect in the previous Super Mario Nation shows, they've gotten so good that I would say that they perfected it at this point. This was their peak at that point in time.
What would you say with this? What do you think about the sets in the show? Like, I mean, you had Spectrum where you had Colonel White like on his spinning desk, which I think was probably a bit of a nod to Professor Maddox, spinning desk in Fireball XL5.
Yeah, I do agree.
Yeah, I think there was that. And mind you, the one thing I'll say is that, if you watch Fireball XL5, I mean, they even had episodes where, people were being controlled by, like, aliens and stuff. And so that was sort of kind of like, a precursor to the Mysterons, I guess you could say.
That's true.
And so I think there was a lot of, like, you can see a lot of Fireball XL5, if you look very closely in Captain Scarlet and the Mysterons. And, but to say at the same time as well, like, I think some of the other stuff that they also did in other Super Mario Nation projects, they also did in, they did in Captain Scarlet. I mean, like, let's be honest, we are getting way away from, like, the black and white shows, I think at this point. I think, obviously, we've gone into a whole different world when we enter into, the world of Spectrum. But, I think with regards to the way that the sets were done, is some of the way that some of the, it was interesting about the SUV, the fact that, SPV, I should say, that they had it where, the cockpit was backwards and you watched it on a video screen instead of, be watching it forwards. That was always an interesting thing to me. Like,
yeah, that was interesting, yeah.
I mean, it created a bit of a flaw in it where you could just jam the video signal from, going to the SPV, but I can sort of understand from an instinct that you don't want the user going forward because obviously you don't want the Spectrum unit to be in the line of fire, I guess, when it's dealing with a dangerous situation. But I don't know whether it just kind of be cool or whether they just kind of did it like, oh yeah, there was a reason for doing this.
I probably take it as for production reasons, probably because it was a lot easier to shoot.
I guess so.
I know that we've been pointing out a lot of the flaws in it, and we've been pointing out a lot of the praises for it. But at the end of the day, you have to understand on why that we were so frustrated with how it ended up, how the last episodes ended up, because it started off in such a high note, but then, as time went on, when things just kind of like stopped with, progressing the story, that's when we felt the most frustrated. It's like, oh, you were so close into going somewhere, and then you just stopped prematurely because Lou Grade wanted to move on on to the next thing. And it's like, oh man, I wish that he would have given this
Yeah,
show a chance.
moving away from Luke Ray, like, he gets too much. I think he gets too much, shade in this show or in this podcast series already. But in regards to like going back to the sets again, like the one that in Noose on Ice, where like they had the base in the middle of like where the in the middle of like, was it the North Pole or was it the South Pole? I can't remember which pole it was, but in the middle of like in the middle of like an ice area, and then they turned off the the generators end up getting like turned off, and then all of a sudden the ice starts forming again, and like it ends up kind of like strangling the base, and they're all worried that where they're all going to die in a certain period of time, and then Captain Scarlet comes into the rescue, and which is a really cool sequence.
Yeah, and it was definitely a much bigger improvement of ice physics compared to when they tried to do this with Supercar, where Dr. Beaker was trapped in the ice cave, or with Fireball XL5, in which you had Steve Zodiac, Professor Maddox, and Dr. Venus trapped in the ice cave. And yeah, I mean, this one was definitely the most convincing that, oh yeah, they're definitely trapped in ice, and it's going to be very, very serious if they don't stop the ice from forming. So yeah, I do think that they were able to, once again, do a really great job in bringing the suspense of all the elements that they were around.
Yeah, I think, unfortunately, I think another thing about the show is that you really want to get invested in our main characters, because, the other side characters that are all in this, I'm not talking about the Angels, I'm not talking about everyone at Spectrum, I mean, like, there's not really, like, any, like, side characters outside of Spectrum, really. Like, it's either, like, all the people looking after the SPVs, or, like, it's the, just the kind of the throwaway characters that just happen to be in the episodes at the time. I mean, like, there's nothing really interesting to kind of gather from it. Either they end up getting killed and turned into Mysterons, or, like, they just kind of disappear after the next episode. There's no reoccurring characters that come from episode to episode in this show. It's more just kind of like just Spectrum, the Angels, and the Mysterons, effectively.
Yeah, I guess that's true. But again, that I guess you were saying earlier, well, people are expecting to watch Captain Scarlet and the Mysterons. That's in the title.
Exactly, yeah.
So yeah, I mean, that does suffer, unfortunately, where if you're not a member of the Mysterons or if you're not a member of Spectrum, then your time to shine is very, very brief. Or
I say the members of the Mysterons must have been easily to budget to create because they don't exist.
That's true. I mean, it's funny.
They're just invisible.
Yeah, that's true. They are invisible. We never get to see what they look like. And that was another thing that we wanted to know about, is that they were invisible throughout the entire series. And we were thinking, are we ever going to see what they look like if they're not invisible? No. Again, that just leaves the suspense.
It makes you wonder, like, those like glowing buildings made out of acrylic. I mean, like, I wonder, is that what the Mysterons are? Like, they're just like, the little thing, like the little tanks and things like running around and stuff like that. Like, are they actually like, the actual physical, like, buildings? Is that the Mysterons? And like, what were they? Were all the Spectrum like, kind of like walking around inside the Mysterons this entire time?
Oh God!
Like it's yeah, like no, I mean it's sort of kind of like implied that I guess maybe they are inside somewhere and they're just like they're invisible. I guess maybe. Like, the only way you kind of, like, know that they're there is because of those green rings. That's about it.
Yeah, that's literally it. Yeah. We never get to see their true forms on what they look like, which, again, I guess that brings into the mystery. It's like, oh, what did their real appearances are? But, again, that just makes you wonder. It's like, you just want more. It's like, you really want to know about what the Mysterons are.
Well, we're not going to get any more, so I think we're going to just work with what we've got. So.
Yeah. Oh, well.
Yeah. All right, everybody. Well, that is Captain Scarlet and the Mysterons. And so, in conclusion, it's a great show. And we really like it, even though, we do feel like they wish there was more of it. And who knows? Maybe the new Captain Scarlet, if we ever get to it, will probably give us a bit more, to whet our appetite, maybe. But, in regards to this show, I mean, like, the way that they were able to take, the goofiness and the silliness out of Super Mario Nation and turn it into, like, oh, wow, we really care about these characters. We really care about what's going on. It's going to be a really serious thing that's going to happen. This war who knows of the Mysterons, it's kind of ongoing. And you really wish it did reach a conclusion, but obviously it doesn't because, it just ends up with like that clip show as we talked about before. But, putting all that aside, it still is a really fun ride.
It is, yeah. I would say that if you're willing to understand the fact that you're never going to see a proper conclusion to the show, I would suggest that you do watch it anyway, because it does leave you so invested and you care about the characters and the story so much that all of that kind of stuff, in a way, would kind of like overlook those massive flaws. So I would suggest that if you are going to watch one Super Mario Nation show out of our discussions of all the other ones that we've been watching throughout this retrospective, watch this one.
Yeah. So, from all of us here at Puppets Go Boom, my name is Aaron.
My name is Patricia.
And we will see you all for Joe 90.
All right, take care, everyone.
Captain Scarlet, he's the one who knows the Mysteron game and things they plan. Captain Scarlet, to his Martian foes, a dangerous name, a Superman. They crash him and his body may burn. They smash him, but they know he'll return to live again. Captain Scarlet, as the angels are flying, wing to wing, into the scene. Spectrum is green. Captain Scarlet, though the Mysterons plan to conquer the earth, this indestructible man